Our next series of pieces are all part of what we call Co-Creation Project. This is Co-Creation Project 3. And if you've been around and followed what Orchestra Novo's been doing over the last several years, this has been an incredible project where it began when I met with James Brescia, the superintendent of schools, and Paul Piet from the Grizzly Academy, and I asked if I could go into a classroom and play some classical music for the cadets there. And without hesitation, they just said, I think this is a fantastic idea, let's do it. And so my wife and I, Suzette, went in there for a couple of days and spent long hours with these students playing the Ravel Pavane over and over and over, and looped. And they got to listen to it, and they got to absorb that music for that period of time. I'm sure none of those students had ever heard of Ravel or the Pavane or classical music or anything like that, but it did something to them that created an incredible outpouring of creativeness. And we did our first program at the Big Pack, and it was stunning. And so we came back, and I got a call from the Grizzly Academy, and they said this was such a big success with the cadets, would you come back and do it again? And so we've been coming back every cycle that they have new students. We've become part of the curriculum over at the Grizzly Academy now, that the students get an opportunity to be an individual, because I don't know if you know the Grizzly Academy at all, but they all have uniforms. They have no first names, they only have their last name. They all have the same haircut, they all have the same hairstyle. It's a very military kind of upbringing and discipline that they have. And they want it, they need it, and they treasure those moments of having 3 meals a day and knowing what they're supposed to do. And so Co-Creation Project has been ongoing, and it's one of the 2 or 3 or 4 of the best days of my year every time. Last year we expanded this idea to bringing classical music to the Alzheimer facilities throughout the county. And we had the Foray Pavane, also a beautiful piece of music that was facilitated for the residents there. As they were listening to the music, they also painted. And if you were here to see that last production, then you knew that as you came in, you saw the paintings on the wall here. We also put those paintings up for the Alzheimer patients, which was quite touching to a lot of the family members who came and had instances where they weren't connecting with their loved one for a long time, but there was something that mom or my love has painted, and it's an expression who that person still was living inside, a very powerful moment for all of us. After that, it was suggested that I approach the folks on the spectrum, the autism spectrum, and I certainly had no knowledge of this segment of our population. I know I'd heard about autism and I'd heard about the spectrum, but I didn't really know much about it. And so I was invited to come and see some art classes that the Autism Center of San Luis Obispo was doing across the street at the Board of Education. They were listening to classical music. They were watching classical painters, mostly from the early 1900s, the early 20th century, and trying to imitate that style. So if it was Cubism, or if it was Mark Rothko, which had boxes, or if it was Mondrian, which had bright colors and angles, or if it was Kandinsky with the circles, then they were encouraged to try to represent that. Some did, and some just painted what they felt like painting. One of the segments I was asked to bring classical music in and play, and so I did something where I tried to place music that was written around the same time the paintings were painted. So early Stravinsky, very listenable stuff, Ravel, Debussy, Prokofiev, all that kind of music, and it related to me beautifully. And the interesting thing is a lot of these folks had come from Russia in the first place, and then they all ended up in Paris, because that's where it was all happening there in the early teens and 20s of the 20th century. So I was playing all this classical music, and the room was all abuzz with energy. And I thought, well, this isn't working very well, and yet people were still painting. And so I figured, well, there was a lot of talking going on. So I tried something completely different. I put on some Bach. You'll hear it in a moment. And the room got silent. It all just calmed down, and the whole energy just settled. And it was a remarkable moment for me to observe the power of Bach and his calming spirit to all of us. And so that was the first segment of working with the folks on the spectrum. I was invited to their summer camp at Camp Arroyo Grande. They meet twice, 2 weeks in a row there, and they have some great times, social events. They're young people. They're from ages 4 to probably 16, but they're sharing experiences. They're learning how to communicate with each other, self-esteem, all these things that will ultimately create a wonderful and mature human being. Because what I noticed at that time of their life, the little ones, the parents are putting in a lot of energy. I mean, it's all the time, energy. And the parents are calm, and they're helpful, and they're supportive, and the kids started getting that kind of connection. I was introduced, probably through Sarah Machelet, to the group up in Templeton, which I really think you would appreciate the restaurant up there, Fig, if you haven't been there. But it's called Courtney's House, and Carrie Sanders and Chris Dillow run the organization there. And it's older students now. We're talking high school kids, maybe out of high school. They're extremely high-functioning human beings. They work in the restaurant. They're given jobs to do. They know each other. They're really good friends, and there's a support group. And I went there 4 times in a row and played a whole bunch of different music. I couldn't play enough of it here to even, for you would be here forever. But I gave them a sample of, again, Bach. Always start with the Bach. And it was to be sort of, this is our introduction. This is how we're going to settle into our own piece and to this process. And so we played the Allemande from the 5th Suite, which Rob will play in a second. And then we took off, and I went in a lot of different directions. I played Our Town, which you'll hear in a little bit. I played the Pastoral Symphony by Beethoven, and told students about, Beethoven walking in the forest and how nature inspires his composing. I played Debussy, Girl with the Flaxen Hair, which will also be played by Robert. And I just noticed how, again, this classical music seemed to really get inside the folks, and they started just expressing themselves so beautifully and creatively. Then it led to another meeting with a group in the North County Cuesta campus called Wired Like This, which is a club of folks on the spectrum that know each other and support each other and help each other. It's a wonderful environment there, and Louise Beckham helped me through that process. So we have all those paintings out there for you to look at later. We're going to start going backwards to the young kids. The first part we'll see of the very, very young kids that participated last year at the Camp Arroyo Grande and at the across the street at the Board of Education. So to help me with this part of the program, I hope you'll join me in welcoming our dear friend, Robert Thies. next piece we'll hear from Robert is the WC, Girl with the Flaxen Hair. This also seemed to grab the attention of all the students that were listening on those days. I had to be careful not to play anything that was too loud, too percussive, too energetic, that would create sort of upsetting kind of feelings. I mean, that's been a repetitive kind of situation. So I thought this impressionist sound would be very good, and I chose paintings that were more reflective of the impressionist kind of creative sense. Finally, I played the Copeland Our Town, a little segment of Our Town for the students, and I just wanted them to imagine, or just to reflect what their town means to them. find it fascinating what classical music creates in people's minds and how they can express themselves artistically. That's one thing I can't do very well. I know some of our painters are here today. Are there any back here? We have some of our wire like this. So, hi guys. Brendan's house. Brendan's house, the Fig restaurant made some snacks for us, homemade cookies for us out in the lobby. So in a moment, I'll have you enjoy those. But we have one more song here that we all have to do together. Today's Robert Thies' birthday.